Okay, we're live.
All right, thank you, Karen. All right, well, I'll call to order this meeting of the Otonabee Peterborough Source Protection Authority on April 21st. I guess I'll start with our land acknowledgement, which is we respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to First Peoples and for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. We have a full attendance tonight, so do we have any disclosure of conflict of interest at this time or when the matter arises? Seeing none, we'll continue. There are no delegations. So I'll look for an approval of tonight's agenda. Approved by Ron and Diane. Thank you very much. All in favor? Looks good. I see no delegation. Oh, sorry, the minutes. Sorry, we're on to the minutes of the meeting we held on February 17th. And Carl, you want to move those minutes? Okay, and sorry, who was second? Joe, very fancy. All in favor? All right, minutes are approved. Business arising from the minutes. I believe there was a question with regard to best practices. I don't know if Meredith, you want to address that for us?
Sure. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. We had talked about, oh, Barry, I'm not sure that you want to be sharing your screen. You may have done that on purpose. You may not have.
There we go.
There we go. Perfect. Now we can see you. Yes, in the at the last meeting, there was a discussion about the best practices guidance information that was going to be provided by the ministry. We did receive that. It's referred to in the correspondence, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention during business from the minutes. At our last meeting as well, Director Zippel asked about the reference to old science in the March 25th, 2022 SPC meeting summary. And I had indicated I thought that was related to the fact that the assessment report and the source protection plan were put together using information that was available between 2006 and 2011. So I did confirm that that was correct. So it's still good information, it's just old. And there's also a reference to that in the correspondence package. There's a letter from February 15th, 2022 from the chairs and project managers from the Eastern Source Protection Committees to the ministry. And item 5 also refers to the fact that that science is getting on towards 20 years old. So that's what that was in reference to. And that's all from the business from the minutes.
Thank you for that, Meredith. It moves us on to our actual reports. So our first report we have to deal with tonight is the SPA 2022-006, the annual progress report. So I believe this is back to you again, Meredith. This is your show tonight.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So this is related to the annual progress report that the lead Source Protection Authority, so Lower Trent, as the Trent Conservation Coalition Source Protection Region lead, they have to submit this by May 1st to the province. So what you received in your package is it's the way it looks when we download it from the electronic reporting system. So it's not the most beautiful document, but that's why the formatting is a little weird. But those are the responses that go into that annual report, and then that's shared with the province. You've seen it a couple of different ways over the years, but what it does is it includes that progressing well on target progress score. And so that's consistent with the one that you gave the Otonabee Peterborough Source Protection area at our last meeting. So yeah, it indicates that everything is going well, everything is progressing. You may, I don't know how closely everyone read that report, but there are a couple of places where you might see it's not 100%. That's generally because things are in process. Particularly, there's one section related to official plans. As you're all aware, both the county and the city are in the process of updating their official plans, so you don't see 100% because that work is in progress. Similarly, the septic inspections, you'll see it's not 100%. That's because we work on a 5-year inspection cycle. So we're in the middle of that 5-year period. So by the end of the 5 years, you'll see 100%, but you don't see it now. It's not because anything has happened or anything's delayed. It's just because we're in the midst of that work. I did receive a question from one of the members related to those septic inspections. So I'll share that response with you. It was wondering who does those inspections, and is it the risk management official? No, it is not. That's outside the scope of the risk management officials in the legislation. So that's actually done by the principal authority. So for most of the municipalities, that's Peterborough Public Health. The Township of Douro-Dummer also has their own septic inspector. So that was the response to that question. I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has about that report.
Carl, I think I saw your hand go up first, but Paul, I got you noted.
Sure. Thank you for the report. What caught my eye was page 6 of the actual report. The number of septics in Norwood drinking water system. It's going from 185 to 212, and I think a good number of those are in Douro-Dummer. Is that concerning, or is it? It just seems to be a high number of septic systems to keep a real close eye on.
And I am just looking at that report. That 138 is the number in the entire source protection region, not just in Norwood. I
was looking under type number 3, septic inspections.
Yes, I can. Yep, I can see that. So I'm just looking at how this is written. So there are, and I may call on Terry Cox to just help me out with the numbers because I don't have all of those in front of me right now, but I believe it was an additional 24 septic systems that were added to the vulnerable area in Norwood when the vulnerable area delineation was updated as a result of the changes to the drinking water system. And so what you see there, that 185 to 212 is for the entire source protection area, not just specifically to Norwood. But okay. Through you, Mr. Chair, may I ask Terry to confirm that number for me?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. The true number of septic systems in the Autonomy Peterborough source protection area is well below that figure. And since those figures were compiled and put in the assessment report, there's been further refinement of the numbers, and various properties were confirmed that they were actually connected to the municipal sanitary sewer. The result of the new Norwood wellhead protection area did not result in any additional septic systems located in the township of Douro-Dummer being captured.
Yeah, pardon me, I think I misread the report.
Excellent. All right, sorry, Paula?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Just building on what Carl was saying, it was the Norwood question and the Norwood drinking water. But building upon that, I was just wondering, I know that Peterborough Health Unit does do the septic inspections. I was just wondering what kind of criteria do they use? Like, do they use farms 1 year and then they move to cottages and then homes? Or how does that process work when they are doing septic inspections every year? And I know it's outside of your scope. I just thought you might have the answer to that.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The septic inspections that we're talking about in the source protection program, they're specific to the vulnerable areas with a vulnerability score of 10. So those wellhead protection areas and those intake protection zones only. So it's quite a small geographic area. However, many municipalities do have their own septic inspection systems. I'm not able to speak to the criteria they've used to establish which systems they do inspect. I believe the municipality of Trent Lakes has one of those programs. But yeah, as it's outside the scope of this program, I can't speak to the details. I'm sorry.
No worries. Thanks, Meredith.
All right. Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And and through you to Meredith, sticking with the theme of septic systems. We don't get involved with them that much, so it's just a little curious. It said that in 2021, 7% required maintenance, and we're on staggered 5-year cycles. So do you have to wait to catch whether that maintenance has been performed, or how does that get followed up on?
Through you, Mr. Chair, another great question. So again, the Peterborough Public Health or the Township of Douro-Dummer are doing the inspections in our area on a 5-year cycle. So the inspectors have a specific criteria and list of things that they do. They certainly document which septic systems require maintenance, and they do have the legislative ability to ensure that those septic systems are functioning properly. So when we do the electronic annual reporting, part of what we see is how many were inspected, how many needed work done, was the work done. So we get a little bit of that information, but again, that's all done through the Building Code Act.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions? Well, I have a question for you, Meredith, and that is, what percentage triggers the progressing well versus not progressing well versus whatever else criteria there is? Because I did notice in one of the pages, the Kawartha Halliburton source protection area, it had like a 60% rating or 67%. And like the percentages, as you mentioned, are kind of all over the place, but everything still said progressing well. But what would trigger it to not say progressing well?
Through you, Mr. Chair. In the report, table 1 actually spells out a little bit of the criteria for you for those scores. It's a little more subjective than a percentage threshold, but progressing well and on target is most of the source protection plan policies have been implemented and or are progressing according to the timelines in the plan. S, satisfactory, would be some of the policies have been implemented. And then L is the limited progress made. So that's if there were, I anticipate if there were significant challenges in implementing. But because the scores in our area are certainly well above 50 to 60%, you know, most of them are close to 90 or 100, then the Source Protection Committee has given it that progressing well score.
Okay. Thank you for that clarity. I see, Michael, you have your hand up again. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just a bit of a clarification. Progress report, page 2, or the PDF of the full agenda is page 15. It says the number of municipalities in the TTC SPR with residential drinking water systems is 24. And then it's 22 lower tier and 5 upper tier. I'm just curious whether it should be 27.
Ms. Cox? Or Meredith? I don't know which one you want to take.
I can certainly check on that. Again, this is the TCC report. So 22 lower tier and 5 upper tier containing vulnerable areas. I can certainly ask the TCC to confirm that those numbers are accurate.
Yeah, the one with the vulnerable area was 43, and those add up. It was just something that caught my eye. It's not really I don't think it's a really serious thing. Just a question.
Yeah, I'll certainly bring it to the attention of the TCC staff that compiled the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Sherry, I see your hands up.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to move the recommended motion, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely. Do we have a seconder? Diane, thank you. All in favor? Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, Terry. And Meredith, for your report. Moving on to reports for information is SPA 2022-07. Approved amendments to direct. You want to enlighten us on this one as well, Meredith?
I will do my best. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So this report is intended to summarize where we're at currently with the updated director's technical rules. So you'll recall this has been a long process. It took quite a number of years for us to get the approval. We did get the approval of these back in December of 2021. And then we were waiting for some of the guidance documents from the province to help us understand more fully what the impact is of the changes on threats and how we understand threats in the source protection area. So what we did here for you is we provided a table that just gives you a high level summary of what those amendments mean. We did a similar table for you back in early 2021 before they were approved. And there were quite significant changes to what was proposed to what was actually approved. So if you look down the table, you can see some of the changes are related to where threats can occur, and some of them are related to the circumstances under which those particular prescribed activities can be significant drinking water threats. So I'll walk you through a couple of them. Road salt application. So those can be significant, or that particular activity can be a significant drinking water threat in the applicable area that you see there. So that's the wellhead protection area A and the wellhead protection area and the intake protection zone. The previous approach was that it could only be a significant drinking water threat in very limited areas of the Peterborough and Lakefield intake protection zones. The amendment is revising the methodology and the thresholds. So it's going to result in an increased number of significant drinking water threats. We don't have all of the details yet. We are waiting for some mapping and some further analysis to be provided to us from the TCC. One of the changes is also a proposed policy that's going to limit the use of risk management plans to large parking lots. So those with more than 50 spots, because what we're trying to avoid is a private homeowner needing a risk management plan to put salt on their driveway. That doesn't make any sense. Big parking areas, more than 50 spaces, that makes more sense. So it's those types of amendments that do have the impacts, but it does take a while for us to get through all of the detail to figure out, okay, what does that mean locally? So we'll certainly keep you apprised as we work through that process and receive some of the new information from the TCC and the province. As a collective, we've submitted a number of questions back to the province through Conservation Ontario, asking for clarity as to how to implement some of these amendments. We're still waiting for that information, so we need that to be able to move forward, to be able to say exactly what the impact is in terms of how many new significant threats this is and where areas have changed, where we have new threats. Road salt storage, that's one we had talked about. The thresholds for that one, they were reduced to as low as 10 kilograms, but that's storage that's exposed. So that's a really important factor there. So it's not a sealed container. It's if it's in a pile and it can be exposed to precipitation or runoff. So there's some really specific criteria, and we refer to those as the circumstances. Another one, if you look at fuel, and I apologize, I realized that I forgot to give you a couple of other acronyms, explanations of acronyms in this one. So you'll see BG, that stands for below grade. PBG is partially below grade. So you can see that's what the previous approach was. So below grade and partially below grade, greater than 250 liters of fuel, such as furnace oil, in a wellhead protection area. So that can be a significant drinking water threat. What the change is here is now above grade fuel storage. So a fully above grade storage tank can now be a significant drinking water threat. So that's a good change. You know, it didn't make sense that a tank in your basement is a threat and the one out back isn't. Now they both are. So you'll see a number of changes like that. Part of what we'll be doing, and Terry in particular, it will be looking at the details of these circumstances. So where can you have a significant drinking water threat, under what circumstances, and then undertaking the threat enumeration. So how many threats could be in the source protection area, and then verifying those threats. They could be here, how many are actually there? And then that's what Terry uses to ensure that she has all of the required risk management plans in place and has a fulsome understanding of where the local significant drinking water threats are. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Meredith. And Joe, you got a question right away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Meredith. If I'm not mistaken, Meredith, the insurance industry is working towards making sure all furnace oil storage tanks are located outside. If you have a tank in your basement that's more than 10 years old, I believe you have to get it moved outside. And so what that's going to do is mean, I guess, because most furnace oil tanks are at least 200 liters and some more than that for home heating. And so what that's going to mean is anybody with an oil furnace in the source protection area will now have to be covered under this particular portion of the risk protection plan. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask Terry for some clarification. I know she's been in direct contact on a regular basis with the TSSA and many of the fuel suppliers, so she's going to have much more current information.
Thank you. Yes, you're right that there are special circumstances that surround tanks that are not double walled. Every 10 years, fuel oil suppliers are required to inspect tanks and are not allowed to fill any tank if it is single walled. So at that point, those folks are required to upgrade to a double walled tank or change the type of heating source that they have. I have not been aware of any communications from the TSSA as far as they're requiring tanks be moved outside. The Clean Water Act determines if a tank is a threat based on its grade. So below grade has been a significant drinking water threat that's subject to policies, and we have risk management plans in place for those. And of course, those are located in basements. Sometimes you get above grade tanks that are inside, perhaps in a carport or garage, and others are fully exposed to the elements at the exterior of the dwelling somewhere. In all of those instances, once the new rules take effect locally, they will be significant threats and subject to risk management plans. And that's where I will be contacting those individuals and ensuring there's proper measures in place to prevent or contain potential spills or leaks that could impact surface water or groundwater sources.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? No? All right, we'd like to receive this report. Andy and Barry, all in favor? Steve, thank you very much. I believe you have the next report as well, Meredith, the SPA 2022-08, the Trent Conservation Coalition Source Protection Committee update.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. This is just an update on the most recent Trent Conservation Coalition Source Protection Committee meeting. I did again include the meeting summary of this one, and these are all available on the TCC website, both the meeting summaries and the full minutes, should you be interested. Item number 2 is a chair's report, so the chair of the Source Protection Committee, and he's just speaking about the correspondence that included the information, or included a request for that best management practices guide and some related information. And so that correspondence is attached in the correspondence section of the report. So I just thought I'd draw your attention to that. You'll see item 3 also relates to the annual progress report that you just received. Again, just confirming some of those scores, progressing well on target, and identifying some of those challenges I explained related to official plans and septic systems and why the numbers aren't 100%. I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has about that meeting summary.
Anybody got any questions? Nope. All right, we received that report. And Paula and Carl, all in favor? It's received. Thank you very much. All right, the next two items are the verbal updates on the communication. I think you covered a piece of it there, Meredith. You want to go over the rest of the correspondence?
Sure, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I'll start with the media. Thank you to Karen Halley, who has done a great job putting all of our social media out, and certainly Terry Cox has contributed lots of information to this. So we've had a really successful couple of months of communications. We did a campaign related to the specific drinking water systems in the source protection area. So Peterborough, Lakefield, and Millbrook. We try to do one a month. And we received, for the total of those 3 posts, almost 10,000 people were reached and 219 people engaged with us. So we boosted those posts. Not sure how social media savvy everybody is. It's essentially you pay to have it come up as an advertisement. And so those, when we did that, we were able to reach 23,000 people. So certainly getting out to a lot of people. Yeah, Peterborough just under 2,000, Lakefield just under 5,000, and Millbrook is about 3,500. So that's great. We've started to receive lots of comments back from these posts, which is wonderful because that means people are interested in their drinking water. Sometimes they're questions. We often refer them to the operator. So often it's Peterborough Utilities or the municipality. There were some questions about septic systems, and other things related to Peterborough Public Health. So what we often end up doing is referring people to those agencies. But we were really pleased to see that level of interest in our drinking water posts. Conservation Ontario has also initiated a Water Wednesday post. So you'll start seeing those coming out from us on Wednesdays. And we try to link those to seasonal themes. So you'll see some related to spring runoff, spring cleaning, well testing, pet waste, all of those things that you see happening in the springtime. And then we'll continue that throughout the year with seasonal messages.
Excellent. It's great to get the word out there, Meredith. Thank you. Any questions for Meredith regarding the correspondence? No? Shall we receive the correspondence? Kim and Jim, all in favor? Excellent.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Sorry, Kim.
I did have a question about the correspondence, not the media coverage, if we're passing them together. Or
I was passing them together, but go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So my question was related to the MECP letter back to Keith Taylor. And having sat in on a Bill 109 provincial workshop yesterday, there's a lot of concerns with how things are changing under Bill 109 and affordable housing under the province. And I see that there's a lot of reliance for areas not covered by provincially approved source protection plans on the best practices for source water protection document that's come out. But my understanding of that type of a BMP document is it wouldn't apply to legislation. BMPs are just that. So I'm not sure how that helps, how it's going to help with identifying vulnerable areas, how it's going to work with privatized water and sanitation. I didn't really find that it answered the questions that were posed by Keith. So Keith Taylor, and maybe you could speak more to that, or Terry could, Meredith.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll do my best. So the letter that Director Zippel is referring to is the March 9th from Kristen Corrigal. So she does refer to the best practices for source water protection document. And so you're right, it's a best practices document intended to protect the water sources and drinking water systems that are not included in a source protection plan or regulated by the Clean Water Act. So it's all those other systems. So certainly the same best practices apply. You want to be very careful what you do right beside your drinking water source, whether you have a municipal system or whether you have a private system. So it's looking, the document provides sort of a risk assessment framework for people to take a look at and say, okay, if I'm going to do something around a drinking water system that's not regulated under the Clean Water Act, what should I be doing? What should I be thinking about? How do I assess the risks? So it provides some guidance. It's not required, you're right. This is where it's a little tricky. There's a fine line between the Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act, and we are not involved in the Safe Drinking Water Act. So this is really just providing that framework so people can make good decisions and look for additional information about how to protect those systems that aren't otherwise protected by the Clean Water Act. So then the references to the affordable housing, that is specific to areas that are not serviced, really. So if you were going to be building affordable housing in an area that isn't serviced, then you would be essentially installing a new private system, and the municipality, if they were going to be assuming that system, might want to investigate how best to protect that drinking water system, and then looking at whether or not it's going to fall under the Clean Water Act. So it's a lot of information. That's sort of the general flavor of what was included in that correspondence. Does that answer your question?
Through the chair to Meredith, it certainly helps. I mean, looking at some of the projects perhaps in our watershed, which could be over 500 homes on a private system. I don't know if there's an obligation for the municipality to get involved, if it legislatively, if it's a choice, or what protection the people who live in those homes, whether be they affordable or not. And that's certainly a arbitrary definition these days. So I'm just, it still seems like a very new area. Bill 109 is certainly bringing up some challenges for municipalities. And I think safe drinking water is going to be one of them. So I'm just, asking the question under legislation that you might be familiar with, will there be source protection rather than best management practice, which I don't know how that's regulated, followed up on, tested, if there's reporting. There's just, it seems like it's very open and not prescriptive. So I think maybe it's more of a concern, Meredith, and ask if you have more information on where it's heading. I know it's all happening pretty fast and pretty new, but certainly municipal councillors have responsibilities under the Clean Water Act. And so I'm just raising it as a concern, I guess. And if there's more information that you can make available as it becomes available to yourselves or to Terry, if you could share it with the committee, it would be appreciated.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we can certainly do that. And we've actually reached out to the ministry for some additional information related to that because we had some similar questions. We also always encourage our municipalities when we speak with our municipal staff, but it also applies to all of you, that if you do become aware of a new installation of a drinking water system or changes to an existing drinking water system, to let us know right away, and then we can follow up and walk through the process and make sure that any legislation that applies, that we're all aware of it. And many times there are prescriptive processes that we do need to follow. And so then we can provide support for that. Through you, Mr. Chair. Terry, were there any other details there that you wanted to add?
Yeah, this is a really hot topic. To be clear, if there are more than 6 dwellings connected to a system that is operated by the municipality, then it will be captured under the Clean Water Act. It's not optional. So if there is going to be a new development in which the municipality may be assuming the system, if there are more than 6 units, then there will be Clean Water Act considerations. Exactly how that process will roll out remains to be seen. And as Meredith mentioned, we have asked those questions of the ministry, and we'll certainly pass that information on to you as we receive it. But I think the key takeaway is if there is any suggestion that the municipality at some point may be taking on a new municipal residential drinking water system, assuming it or otherwise, let us know right off the hop. And that way we can ensure that we provide the municipalities with the information that they need, so there are no surprises as you move through the process, and that the costs to bring a system in under the Clean Water Act are discussed up front.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
All right, any more questions on this? Even though we've, no. Okay, well, we don't have any closed session. Don't think we have any other business. I see that you have a Source Protection Committee meeting coming up in May, Meredith. To go through this
May or
again.
June, we don't know the date yet. I'll, so I can certainly update you on that after the fact.
Okay. And your working group sometime when you call it, and then we'll have another Source Protection Authority meeting in October as it's scheduled now. Excellent. All right, can I somebody call for adjournment? Diane, Barry, all in favor? And thank you. That concludes the Source Water Protection meeting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, folks.
All right, you guys want to take 5 minutes before we start our Orca meeting, or is that good? Will we say 5:45? Does that work for everybody?
Perfect.
All right, reconvene at 5:45. All right, so we'll give it another minute and we'll get rolling. I think, who are we missing? Carl? All right, Karen, we're still live, are we not?
Yes, we are.
All right, and yes, we'll get rolling. So I will call to order tonight's regular Board of Directors meeting for the Autonomy Region Conservation Authority. We respectfully acknowledge that we're on the treaty and traditional territory of the Massasauga Anishinaabe, and we offer our gratitude to First Nation people for their care for, teachings about our earth, our relations. May we honor those teachings. All right, can I get a approval of tonight's agenda? Paula and Michael, thank you. All in favor? Excellent. We have no have any disclosures of conflict or pecuniary interest tonight? Seeing none, we have no delegations. Can I get a chance to approve the meetings from March 17th? Carl and Joe, all in favor? So adopted. There is no business arising from the minute. Oh, Carl, sorry, go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, just one issue regarding the minutes. We talked about the whistleblower, and there was reference to there's been no one come forward over the last year. I wonder if that should be noted in the minutes. No one has come forward to me as chair of the Finance Committee or to Dan, whether it's necessary or not, but
I don't see the harm in that being recorded in the minutes.
So we'll approve the minutes as amended then?
Is the
Sure.
mover and the seconder have concerns?
We'll put a sentence in there that just simply says there's been no filings under the whistleblower policy. Or something to that effect. Okay.
Excellent.
thank you.
All right, on to our reports already. So 2022-027, the annual report to the watershed community, Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to call on Karen to help me here, but annually we prepare an annual report of the things we did the previous year. Karen creatively brings that information together and puts it together in a different kind of structure and way, and I'll just let her speak to what she's compiled for us for this year and how it will be distributed. Karen, please.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. Through the chair, I'm pleased to present the board the 2021 annual report to the watershed community. It provides a summary of our accomplishments for the past year and some of the highlights, which include another record year for planning and permitting inquiries and permit applications. Our first major fundraising campaign, Your Meters Matter, raising over $23,000 for the Jackson Creek Trail revitalization, and overall an 800% increase in our donor base. We published our climate change strategy and commenced with the first stages of its implementation. There were increases in the number of visitors to our conservation areas. We issued 16 flood messages. And we experienced a much greater online presence with over 3,000 students attending virtual education programs,
a 24% increase in followers across our social media platforms, and many more services became available electronically to our watershed residents. This year's report was designed in the landscape view to optimize viewing online. And this year it includes embedded links to connect the readers to our website for more information about our programs and services. The report will be distributed electronically through Conservation Ontario and to our fellow conservation authorities. It will be posted on our website, and it will be distributed through our social media channels and our e-newsletter. An accessible format will be available upon request. Are there any questions about the 2021 annual report?
Any questions? Mike, you have the question?
Thank you, Chair. Not a question so much as a comment. To share my excitement for this really strong visual document. I mean, it hits all the points. It's very visual. It's very easy to read, and I think it's something concise that people can really see the successes that we've had over the year without having to dive into something that's very literature. So, congratulations. I think it's great that way. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. Paula?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Again, Karen, I really love the document, really easy to read. I was just wondering, it does say that it's going out to the municipalities, and I was just wondering how soon it will be sent out, because I would really like to have it included in our upcoming council meeting, which is next week. So I don't know, no stress, but I was just wondering what kind of dates you had to get this report out. Thank you.
Sure. Through the chair, I can have this up on the website tomorrow. So immediately after the meeting. So once it is available online, it can be shared broadly. So I can work with Dan to make sure that all the right people receive it.
Excellent. Thank you. Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the report, Karen. Again, I'll echo those comments. It's very well done. And it does say that the report will be sent to each member municipality. But in years gone by, when we could actually meet in person, I know that Dan and sometimes another staff person from Orca would make a presentation to the various councils with a report like this. Is that planned for the year 2022, or will it just be sent electronically as we're discussing now?
Perhaps I could answer that question. We will make the offer to all the CAOs for myself or somebody from Orca to make a presentation on the annual report as we have in previous years.
Okay, great. It's met with a great deal of interest, I think, from all council members of all the municipalities, and a personal presentation is preferred as opposed to just a written copy, because there's questions, and the councilors like to have someone there to answer them. So if you can make those arrangements, Dan, I'm sure that Otonabee Monaghan will accept the invitation, and I expect most others will as well. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? I want to echo everybody's sentiment as well, Karen. I think the report's fantastic. I think you did an amazing job on that.
Thank you.
Would anybody like to move the recommendations? Andy and Gary, all in favor? So accepted. Thank you very much. All right, our next report then is 2022-028, the policy framework for negotiation of Section 28 compensation agreements. This will be a fun one for you, Dan.
Thanks. I'm going to ask Dawn Allen to join us now. Dawn has been with us for 5 years, initially hired as a regulations officer and then a planning and development officer, and he was acting in Jennifer's position, and he was appointed in March to the position full-time. So on a go-forward basis, Dawn will have carriage of implementation of this policy, and it was primarily his staff that developed it. So this is a report back to direction from the board about a year ago when the MZO business first came out and the changes to the Conservation Authority Act associated with MZOs. It was early days for all of us in the Conservation Authority community. We came back last fall with a backgrounder discussion piece on the state of practice out there around compensation agreements, how that had changed a little bit with the provisions of the amended legislation and the like. And we're now returning with a fairly tightly focused set of white lines to guide staff when negotiating compensation agreements pursuant to the provisions of the legislation where a permit must be issued. And that's in where minister's zoning order is issued. You'll see in the staff report the key elements of the document, and the document is attached for your information. So very narrowly, this is scoped to completing agreements where an agreement must be put in place because there's a minister's zoning order requiring a permit to be issued. We lay out kind of the major components or elements of it. We identify the basic roles of the parties, including the role of the board. We're suggesting that the board has already directed that they will approve any permits required to be issued under this provision of the legislation. So we're suggesting that the board also approve the compensation agreement. Now, we typically do that through the executive committee, but it's not in the hands of staff, which is what I want to be clear on. And finally, we're suggesting that while we don't really know the cost structure for negotiating these things, we would consider these permits to be a complex or major permit. And we're suggesting that because there could be a lot of back and forth here, we're suggesting doubling the fee that we typically charge a major permit for negotiating or for providing a permit where a compensation agreement also has to be provided. So those are the key elements of it. Between Don and I, we welcome any questions, and I'll give him the tough questions to answer, and I'll keep the easy ones. So we're in your hands, Mr. Chair.
All right, well, welcome, Mr. Allen. And Carl, right out of the gate.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Moving forward with this, I'm sure it'll be a learning curve for all of us. And I guess I'm glad to see that the suggestion is for an interim fee of twice, because when we get going in this, it could be a requirement for twice, 3 times, or 4 times the normal fee for this. Because, and the other thing that really concerns me, or not concerns me, I just wondered about developers. This is going to increase the risk to developers, I would think, big time. And are developers that are moving forward with these kinds of approvals with the province, are they getting additional, is there any word that they're getting additional insurance on? Because these environmental issues could come back to bite them 5 years or 8 years or 10 years down the road. We won't be to the same extent of reviewing it that we would normally do. And to move forward so quickly like this, there's going to be things missed that people will be, in time, will be quick to blame everyone. And it'll be a lawsuit that we get, you know, the mud ball will be thrown at us and the developer and so on. Is there, for those, Dan and Andy, with your experience on the Ontario Conservation Group, is there any concerns similar to that surprise that developers are going to start moving ahead with these kinds of applications and not assume a whole lot more risk?
Well, through you, Ryan, I'll take a stab at this. So the Planning Act always had provisions for the minister to put in place the minister's zoning order. The minister's zoning order, so what it really does is it allows the minister to pass a bylaw or a zoning bylaw amendment to facilitate something. It could be a new development.
And I'm having a hard time hearing you. Can you maybe speak a little bit louder? Sorry.
I'm sorry. So the Planning Act has had for a long time provisions to allow a minister to zone land for something in the provincial interest. And this particular government seems to be using that provision more than previous governments for a wider range of purposes. And they also amended the legislation that where our permits are required, they added a new requirement that compensation, ecological compensation, has to be negotiated. And a permit is not valid until that agreement is in place. So they've taken some risk and costs out of the front end process of obtaining zoning order amendments. And they've backloaded some of it into things like compensation agreements from us. And they haven't given any relief from any other kind of requirements around a plan of subdivision or site plan control or any other mechanisms that a municipality may have. So in the two examples we have before us today, one developer has clearly designed something that excludes any incursion into our regulated areas, therefore wouldn't need a permit from us and wouldn't require a compensation agreement. So they have a very eyes wide open, and they're managing the risk. The second one acknowledges that they have to do a compensation. They've set aside a piece of land to cover that requirement, but all the details of that conversation and whether the set aside is adequate and whatnot, that pin hasn't dropped yet, and we don't know until we get down the road with them. So I think the smarter ones will put this and assess its risk in the context of the overall projects. Some may choose to simply avail themselves of this opportunity and not really truly understand what it gives relief from and what they're still obligated to do. So I think we're early days. I would say in managing our risk, I think the law is clear. I think we can, as long as we can demonstrate we're acting in conformance with the requirements of the legislation, I think we're okay. But we'll see. Expectations are different out there. You're right, expectations are huge, so we don't know.
Thanks, Dan. Any other questions? No, seeing none, how do we want to handle it? We receive it. Andy? You
I think we want to adopt the policy.
adopt the policy. A seconder? Diane? All in favor? Excellent. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Don.
All right. So next is 2022-029 Lakefield Campground Operational Agreement. Dan?
Hi. On that one, the board previously gave us a mandate to work with the Township of Selwyn to negotiate an agreement for operating the Lakefield Campground. It was to be an operating agreement, not a land tenure, land lease type of arrangement. We've done that, had that conversation and negotiation. There's an attached agreement to the report. It has been vetted by our lawyers, and any concerns they had with indemnifications and the like have been addressed. So very simply, we're going to be operating a campground. We're providing ancillary services like retail sales and boat rentals. The boats will be canoe rentals, canoes be provided by the township. They've asked us to administer the off-season storage of trailers. So basically collect the fee and ensure that the places are shut down for the winter. And they've also asked us to administer a small marina or docking facility for the campers who have a boat and wish to dock, and it'll be up to 24 spots. And so that's the scope of the work for us, is basically managing a campground and ancillary uses. The municipality retains ownership of the property, the infrastructure, all associated capital costs. They'll also maintain the public beach and the playground equipment, and the Marshland Center is not part of this. So I think we're in pretty good shape financially. We'll be able to recover our costs, including an annual fee we would have to pay to the township. And at this point, we're projecting that we would probably generate a profit in the range of 150,000 a year, which we would equally split. And for us, it's a good deal. For the township, I think it's a good deal. And finally, just to be clear, this would be a Category 2 program and service. It is a municipal service that the municipality wishes to have performed or deliver, and we are delivering it on their behalf. So that meets the Category 2 definition. The form and structure of the agreement satisfies the requirements for a Category 2 agreement. Upon any resolution from this board, if the board passes this, then this will go to council in the next week or so for their approval. And we would take over the agreement for November 1st, 2022. First camping season would be next spring, 23. I think that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Dan. For clarity, it's a 5-year agreement, correct?
It's 5-year with provisions for 5-year renewals. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Any questions or comments? Ms. Zippel?
Ms. Zippel. Just a quick question through you, Mr. Chair, to Dan. There's a trail system that just goes around the periphery of that campground. Is that part of the land that Orca would be maintaining?
We'd be cutting the lawn around that. The trail, the public access to the trail would be maintained. And that's why we say this is not a land lease arrangement. We're simply operating the campground infrastructure and keeping the property clean, but the public access to that trail is not changed in any way.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you. Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dan, I'm glad to hear that the operating agreement was vetted by our lawyers, because it must have been written by lawyers. It is, it's a tough read to try to get through. I expect that it's identical or very, very similar to the operating agreement we have now with Beaver Meat. Is that correct? So that's taken us a lot of work, a lot of time, and I can see a terrific advantage of that. I think it's going to be one of these unusual arrangements where it's good for both sides, and we don't know for sure. Neither does the township, but it's, as we said, the decision was made meetings ago to let's give it a try. I think you've got everything covered here that at least you can anticipate, and it looks good to me. If we can realize a profit of between $50,000 and $100,000, the Conservation Authority, then I think it's been a good venture. So thank you for bringing this forward, and thank you for all the work you've done on it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Carl?
Thank you. Similar, I'm very happy that we've got an agreement here. This is a very valuable piece of property, and the marshland on the north side there's part of the Lakefield Trail system that's gets a lot of use by not only residents, but people who live in the area that come into the village on a regular basis to enjoy nature. So I congratulate the leadership by you, Dan, and your staff, and the Selwyn people.
Thanks, Carl. Anything else? And again, Dan, I know how much work you've put into this, so it's great that we've gotten this far and that things are working out. I see Sherry is. Go ahead.
Thank you, through you. There's a couple of things. I'm happy to see that Orca would offer kayak and canoe rentals, and I'm wondering how successful has that been at Beaver Mead?
So we've lost track of that a little bit in the last couple of years because we haven't offered it in the last couple of years. And it was primarily in the early days of the pandemic, people worried about cleaning the life jackets. And I don't have before me what either Beaver Mead or Warsaw. I think Warsaw brings in around 5 to 10% a year of the gross revenue. Beaver Mead would be a bit less than that, maybe closer to 5, only because there's more campsites at Beaver Mead. So as a percentage of the total, And Beaver Mead competes with a commercial guy on the other side by what runs a cafe by the M&R building. So it's I'll tell you what, just give me a moment. I've got a budget value here. We're budgeting revenue for watercraft rentals to be about 10,000 a year.
And another question, if I may, at the lookout at the marshland there, I know we did a bit of work on it a few years ago. Is there any thought to maybe doing a little more work there? That is something that's owned by Orca and doesn't have part of this agreement, but it's in the area, so.
So thanks. Sherry's referring to a lookout structure at the Imagine the Marsh property. It's right next door to the lumber yard. We have nothing in the books this year, next year. It is listed as a capital asset that needs some improvements, refurbishments in the out years, but nothing in the immediate years.
And I have a feeling that there'll be a little more focus on that area, and you may get requests from the public to do something. So just giving you a heads up. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sherry. Joe?
Mr. Chair, barring any other questions from the directors, I'd be willing to put forth a motion that we receive the report and approve the recommendations. There's 3 of them contained in that report.
Excellent. Thank you, Joe. Do we have a seconder, Carl?
Yep.
Okay. And any further discussion? No. All right. Call for a vote then. All in favor? Excellent. That seemed pretty easy there, Dan. You have yourself an agreement on our half.
It's kind of anticlimactic, actually.
Yeah, after all the work you put into it. I guess now it has to go to Selwyn and
Yeah.
And then we can have some.
Thank you.
All right, the next report is 2022-030, the adoption of the floodplain mapping. Oh, this one's been circulating for a while too, so it's good to see it come back.
Mm-hmm. So thank you. So a few meetings ago, we advised the board that we had substantively completed 8 floodplain mapping projects. We were going to put them out for kind of a virtual open house. We've done that. It closed the first week of April 8th, I believe. In the report itself, you'll see the number of people that visited our site and spent some time looking at the maps, the story maps, the background literature. We have very few submissions, just 4 or 5. There's also appended there, you get a sense of where the people, where their home internet was, what internet addresses were, who were looking at our site. So the 4 projects that are identified in there now are what our new practice will be is, as we complete these projects, undertake some public opportunity for public review comments. And then we get them back stamped by an engineer. There's a stamp, there's a date that becomes the version. We'll ask the board to endorse that version, which is tied to an engineer's name and stamp and date. And that'll be filed in our office, and those will be the maps that we can reference under section 2.2 of the regulation. So today there are 4 maps. 2 of them are true floodplain mapping projects. 2 were simply mapping exercises, delineating a known elevation level around the lakes. Next month, you'll see a few more because we're just waiting for the engineers to come back with stamp drawings, and you'll see the next group of maps next month. So today it's simply board endorsement is that we will use these as our official version for permitting purposes. And we'll provide them to the municipalities for adoption in their official plans.
All right, thank you, Dan. And it's a huge step forward. So it's a lot of work taken care of. So that's great. Sherry?
Glad to see it, and I will move the recommended motion after any questions from my colleagues.
Excellent. Do we have a seconder then? Kim, do you have any further discussion on it?
I just wanted to mention, Mr. Chair, I really appreciate the paragraph that clarifies that these are the maps that are stored at the Office of the Authority are the ones to be referenced under the regulation. That's certainly helpful for some of our LPAT discussions, and it's good to see it there and happy to second it. And thanks for all the hard work.
Yeah, it's a big step forward. So it's on the floor to adopt these. Any further discussion? No? All right. All in favor? Excellent. Again, a lot of hard work came down to a pretty quick vote there, Dan.
Thank you.
All right, the next one is 2022-031, adjustments to the per diem allowances and honorariums.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one of the things we're paying a little bit of attention to for the next few months is to review our state of our policy repository and see where we can bring in things to get them updated and in a good place of handoff. So one of the things that we did commit to do on a 4-year cycle was to review the per diems paid to board members and the honorarium paid to the chair and the vice chair. Attached to the report is a 2022 survey of what other CAs are doing. And we're recommending a $10 increase to the per diems, a $300 increase to the honorarium for the chair, and a $150 increase to the honorarium for the vice chair. All of these increases will take effect after the municipal election, commencing in January 2023. I am open for questions.
Any questions? And Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dan, for bringing this forward. This is always something that council members or board members struggle with, but we have to keep up with the times. The $10 increase seems reasonable, provided that there aren't a whole lot of legal campground operating agreements to be read with reports that we receive. But, I think it's a modest increase, and I think it's timely, and I certainly have no problem with it.
Thank you, Joe. Anybody else? Gary?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. The City of Peterborough councillors don't get paid to go to meetings, so if you needed someone that was not directly potentially influenced by this, I'd be happy to move or second the report.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Gary. We'll take that as a mover.
Okay.
And Ms. Kim, you want to second it then? All right. And then further discussion, Andy?
No, I was just going to second it. I'm fine with it.
Okay. The only thing I'd recommend, I think, Dan, is when this report comes back, and I guess it'll be another 4 years probably before it comes back, is we might want to like group the conservation authorities in terms of sizing, right? Like comparing us to, you know, Credit Valley or Mississauga Valley isn't really kind of fair. Like it would be kind of more to group them in terms of, you know, what's a comparable conservation authority. And I know it's not really going to be your concern in 4 years, but just
I'll leave a sticky note for somebody.
Excellent. All right, so we accept the report and adopt the recommendations. It has already been moved and seconded, so all in favor? All right, so approved. Thank you very much. On the same lines, 2022-032, proposed expense reimbursement policy amendments. Dan.
So both staff and board members are eligible to have mileage reimbursed. And of course, if your home municipality permits it, or doesn't permit it, that's a different thing. We last changed the mileage rate in 2018 for becoming effective 2019. I think increasingly we're seeing others simply adopting the CRA value, mileage value that they provide annually for whatever, claiming whatever deductions that are permitted through the Income Tax Act. So we're suggesting that we do the same. That way we don't have to always come back. We don't have to come back to the board, whether it's annually or periodically. We simply take whatever the CRA is accepting. With respect to the meal allowance, we're not recommending any change to that. And we're going to take these two items out of our employment policy and just have them as a standalone policy, because they do apply to the board as well as staff. So the recommendation really is a change in the reimbursement rate for mileage.
Excellent. Thank you, Dan. Any comments? No. Shall we receive and adopt the report? Andy?
So moved.
And Carl?
Yep.
Thank you. Any further discussion? And all in favor? Excellent. So moved. All right, moving on to reports for information. Dan, your monthly report.
Yep, thanks. So one thing I put in the monthly report is the two minister zoning orders that have come out within the last month. And I just identified them there for you because I had no other place to keep you up to speed on those things. Two things though that have kind of walked on this week. One was the requirement for me to invite you to attend a webinar that the ministry is putting on around program and service inventory, and it was specifically targeted to members of the Conservation Authority. You are all the members of the Conservation Authority. And earlier today, I also sent to you the response I got from the ministry, and I don't know how to interpret the motive, but I think what the ministry wants to do is speak directly to board directors so that they understand from their perspective what the program and service inventory is about and what should be in it and what shouldn't be in it. So, my colleagues have referenced this as Big Brother or helicopter parenting or a whole bunch of things. That's the response I get. It is what it is. The second item I want to let you know about: earlier this afternoon, we got word that the government released phase 2 of the regulation package. We saw the consultation paper on that in January. We chose not to make a submission. They were pretty straightforward. I will say to you that there's 4 regulations that have come out. One regulation has everything to do with budgeting and levy, and it's a consolidation of 2 older regs with some new process requirements. It has to be applied for the 2024 budget year. The second regulation is a regulation that requires us to post in a very public way on our website all matters related to governance, everything from minutes of meetings to audited financials to bylaws to program service inventories and all that stuff. And it has to be on a spot that's called governance on our website and maintained. One of the things that's in the regulation is all board members have to be identified, and your contact phone number and email have to be provided. So we'll talk about that at some time. The third regulation deals with amending one of the earlier regulations that came out in the first phase. And I can't speak. I still don't understand what they're trying to do. I'll get to it at some point. And then the fourth regulation is a regulation that would apply. In our case, it will apply to the 3 townships that are part of our source protection area, but who are not part of our conservation authority. And it's the regulation that will guide us if we choose to levy a fee against them to support the Clean Water Act Drinking Water Source Protection Program. At this point, we get provincial grants. There's no need to levy them, but it sets up the legal mechanism. The legal mechanism was in the Act. The implementing mechanisms are in this new regulation. So that's what came out today. I'm going to, again, repeat my message from January, February. There's a little bit of processing change here and a little bit of work to do, but it's not a significant change to our world. What's absent in this package, though, was the minister's regulation or a regulation that deals with setting of fees, fee policy on refunds, and what we can charge a fee for. That's missing in this package. They consulted on it, but it's not included in this package. So I don't have any. I suspect we will not see any further regulations now until after the government returns from the election. So that was new this afternoon. Other than that, there's nothing, unless there's any questions on my report. There's nothing else I'd like to speak to.
Well, thank you, Dan. Any questions or comments? No. And Diane, you want to move the report or receive the report, I guess, or receiving? Okay. Second, Sherry. Okay. All in favor? Thank you, Dan. On to the next one to receive is your first quarter financials, 2022-034.
Well, yeah, so there's three components to it. The first is the financials. These are our spend to the end of March. The second is the kinds of activities we've been involved in to the end of March. It has some of the numbers around permits and plan review files and the like. And then the third one is our Section 28 report on the timeliness of our permits. And I think we're running at 99% compliant with the timelines there. So I'll just leave that with you if there's any questions.
Thanks, Dan. Any questions? Nope. All right. We want to move that report? Mike and Carl? Any discussion? All in favor? So moved or received. Thank you, Dan. And 2022-035, the 2021 climate change report card.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask Meredith. I hope she's still available. There she is. Meredith has the lead on behalf of the staff for our climate change work. A little over a year ago, the board adopted a climate change strategy, and about a year or so ago now, the board had approved the implementation plan, and that included an annual report back to the board, which we will then post on our website around how the progress we're making on implementing some of the actions and strategies in the climate change strategy. So in the report here, you have the first year report card. It's a 2-pager. It's nice and hopefully very descriptive with graphics and the like. But I'll let Meredith speak to that. But one of the highlights was we received an award today for the Green Hub initiative, and we got the Tenacity Award. And apparently we got that because we put all of our building infrastructure through a process to understand the carbon footprint that it was creating. So it was the administrative building, the buildings at Warsaw, everything that we operate was kind of brought into the big accounting to create a bit of a number. And I guess we are viewed to be very tenacious in doing that. And from a kind of a not-for-profit perspective, I guess we probably have the most infrastructure that out there. And then after that, obviously, be the municipal governments. But so anyways, we received an award today. We were out in the rain having pictures taken of us receiving it. So it was nice. But anyways, I'll let Meredith, and that award really is an award attributed really back to Meredith's work and Paul Finnegan's work. Both Meredith and Paul really have done a lot of work in advancing our climate change initiative. So Meredith, you want to maybe provide some of the highlights and we can take the board's questions.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we've become part of the Green Economy Hub in Peterborough, and we're part of the first cohort. And so we're the first group of organizations. We're there with the city and the county and Trent University, a number of other organizations, and they're basically helping us through the assessment process to see what is our carbon footprint, What are things that we can do individually as an organization to be more sustainable? How can we learn from each other? So it's been a really interesting process. As Dan mentioned, we did that full inventory of all of our emissions. So it's looking at what's the square footage of all of the buildings, all of the vehicles, staff commuting, all of that kind of stuff, to start to understand where our emissions coming from. And then they move the whole group through strategies to reduce those emissions. So great learning opportunity. I certainly want to recognize, Paul Finnegan, our watershed biologist, because he's been instrumental in helping us get through that inventory process. So all of that led to our award in sustainability leadership today. So that was exciting. And what you can see are the baby steps that we are taking when you look at that climate change report card. We certainly we don't have check marks in all of the boxes yet, but this is our first year. So we're certainly trying to take steps to at least understand what our emissions are, where we can become more sustainable. So over time, you'll start to see more check marks in different boxes, particularly looking at the adaptation and the mitigation pieces.
Thank you, Meredith, and congratulations on your award for being tenacious. Again, this is a fantastic layout and very easy to read and very concise. Like I think that's just key. And questions, Kim?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And yeah, congratulations. Yay, tenacity. That's how we get there. So just a quick question through you, Mr. Chair, to Meredith, and I am happy to move this report as well. We're in the same boat with adaptation in the city. It is a challenging part to get to. And I just had a question about quantifying the future impacts of climate change on the floodplain mapping. So I know we're still undergoing floodplain mapping. And is it possible to do that modeling or forecasting as you're doing the floodplain mapping? Is that something you can just now start to incorporate as you update the floodplain maps?
For you, Mr. Chair, that's an excellent question, and I am not the person to answer that question. Dan, do you want to tackle that one?
Well, and I'm probably even less able to answer that in a technical way. But I can tell you that one of the other things we've done recently was to join forces with the Ganarask Conservation Authority, and we've hired a new water engineer, a master's in water engineering and fluvial morphology. And one of his assignments already has been to start to look at our recent floodplain mapping projects and older stuff, and look at it not only through the lens of currency, but through the lens of risk and climate change. So the good news is we now have some internal technical capacity that can handle that question, and we'll take that as progress, and at some point we'll try to report back to the board on how that's handled in floodplain mapping.
Thank you. Carl?
Yes, thank you, and congratulations, Meredith. Good leadership there. You already know about this, Meredith, but Dura Dummer is a leader in these climate change as well with their building permits, and it's we've different levels of how much carbon zero net procedure. We could have up to 80% of your building permit forgiven for zero carbon loss. And surprisingly enough, it's getting a fair amount of attention. Everyone isn't 80%, but there's different levels. I think one of the levels is 40% by doing certain things, but some of the higher end developers are finding it quite interesting because, and the people that are moving into the homes are basically paying for it. So it's a good move and gets a fair amount of attention.
Thank you, Carl. Gary?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. And just having spent a little over 37 years in education and having written a lot of report cards and read and proofread a lot more, my congratulations, Meredith, to you and your staff. It's aesthetically pleasing. It's easy to understand, and it tells us that we're doing things in a positive way, where we are, where we're going, and what we have to do next. So just from an educational point of view, people who look at this, they get a real quick snapshot of the great work that you and the staff are doing. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks, Gary. Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Meredith, for the report card. I know that Autonomy Conservation Authority is fairly new for us. It's and this report card here lists a number of initiatives that we're undertaking to do our part for climate change. But what I'm wondering, Meredith, is it your expectation that after we've established a baseline, maybe in 2021 or 2022, then we can actually report where we have achieved energy savings in terms of kilowatts, where we have reduced our greenhouse gas emissions, or perhaps reduced our carbon reduction. Is this your intention, that we can actually back up these initiatives with measurable outcomes?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that is exactly what we'll be doing. We're actually participating in a webinar in a couple of weeks with the Green Economy Hub, and what they're doing is helping us look at where our emissions are coming from, and then how can we reduce those. And so now that we have this baseline, we can quantify that. So it's exciting from that perspective, that we can sort of see, okay, where did we start? And we started to see emissions in surprising places. So then we can target our efforts exactly to make sure we reduce those. And while I'm able to speak, I wanted to just make sure that Karen Halley gets the kudos for the beautiful report card. She's responsible for taking the spreadsheets and handwritten notes that I gave her and putting it into this to make it so easy to read. So Karen really gets all of the credit for that, and I think it looks wonderful too.
Excellent. Thank you for acknowledging Karen on that one, because it is very good, very well done. And I know, Kim, you were going to move it. The only thing I'd recommend on that is, I think we should distribute this to our member municipalities. I think we should be putting pressure on everybody to come up with something similar to this. So I think it'd be a good idea to give them kind of this as even a blueprint, and maybe Karen can start a side business of doing report cards for everybody else. But I think it's important that this information needs to get out. Like, even for us to see where we are from a municipal level. I know we get questions all the time about what are you actually doing in these initiatives, right? And it's very hard to get that information to one place and easily digestible for people to understand that these things are being done. So I applaud Karen for the layout and the simplicity of it, and applaud your staff for all the hard work that's gone into it. I don't think we should just receive it. I think we need to send it.
So I'll just step in. We've got a bit of a structure, a model for communicating the annual report. We'll do the same. We'll do the same with not only our climate change strategy, but our first year report card. So the two will go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
And we can certainly connect that into any delegations I make to township or municipal councils that talk about the annual report. We'll highlight the climate change in the annual reporting on that. So thanks for that guidance.
And I assume this lands on our website at the same time, right?
Yes, yeah, it goes through all our social stuff. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. I think Tracy, you had a hand up for a moment there.
I was just going to make the same comment, and I'm the council rep for Kawartha Lakes Environmental Council, and I'm sitting here just writing notes, and just like my eyes are opening up, and I'm certainly going to be sharing with my folks over here, as this is a wonderful model to follow. So thanks for the great job.
Kim, you still good with 4? Or...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if you wanted to add a friendly amendment in there to distribute, I'm fine with that.
Excellent. And seconder? Tracy? All right, all in favor? So approved. Thank you. Excellent job, Meredith, and excellent job, Karen. All right, that brings us to correspondence and media coverage. Dan, if there's anything you want to bring forward, or anybody else wants to bring something forward? Andy?
I think they're pretty straightforward.
I wanted to bring something up under open session. I jumped again, sorry.
No, all right. 3 more seconds, I think, Andy, and then good with you. So receive all the correspondence and media coverage. Joe and Diane, all in favor? Excellent. So received. Open forum, Andy?
Thank you. I have 2 items to bring up. The first is a question to Dan, and we sort of touched on this earlier in the meeting. I didn't know exactly the right place to put it, but it has to do with the passage of Bill 109, which I believe now is passed. And for folks who aren't totally familiar, this bill comes out of a task force that the province put on housing. It took a limited number of the recommendations. You may recall AMO was quite, I don't know what the right word is. We're not at all supportive of the recommendations. The government took a few of those, but have made it clear that they'll return to that after the election if they be in that position. However, on the 109, which is in fact passed, Dan, and this is a question to you, I'm going to read you a document from the ministry. And it says, in issuing an order, because they now will call it the Community Infrastructure and Housing Accelerator Order, which is a fancier name for a ministerial order. The difference is that the minister has institutionalized what had been a practice. So they're saying that they'll do this at the request of municipality, and they're saying that it needs to have a level of public consultation. That's the difference, but it's a ministerial zoning order with another name. But it has an interesting description, and it says, in issuing an order, the minister is able to provide an exemption for other necessary planning related approvals from provincial plans, provincial policy statement, and municipal official plans. That would seem to indicate, if I've read it correctly, that the powers that the minister had under an MZO to demand that a permit be issued is being extended to this new instrument as well. Is that your understanding?
The requirement to issue a Section 28 Conservation Authority permit was made through an amendment of the Conservation Authorities Act. So minister's order doesn't particularly direct that. I think what happened, sorry, let me just backtrack. What happened was when they started using the MZOs, they got into trouble because they were making MZOs in contravention of the provincial policy statement and the provincial plans like the growth plan. So now they've created a new mechanism or a similar mechanism, and they've made it very clear that when an order is issued through this mechanism, the provincial policy statement and the provincial plans, the stuff, other stuff under the Planning Act do not apply. I think that's probably the better interpretation of what that change is, because it doesn't say that it changes the requirement for any other permits under any other legislation.
Why I asked the question, because it goes on to say that the exemption for other necessary planning related approvals from provincial plans, etc., but will be done specifically at the request of the municipality. So they're putting the onus, it would appear, to exempt the permitting process onto the shoulders of the municipal council, as opposed to on the shoulders of the municipality. minister. Minister has the power to do it. Minister says he or she will do it, in this case he, but only if the municipality requests it. So it's an interesting way of wording things. I'm curious as to what it all means.
If I listen to the words to me talk to the high-level policy provisions that flow from the Planning Act, not the implementing mechanisms that come from the Building Code, the Conservation Authorities Act, those kinds of things. I think it's really the high level. They will supersede provincial policy in all its forms through this permit. Through that order. That's how I would read it.
Okay. Anyways, we'll need to get a little bit more information on it, because I really think they're trying to put something onto the shoulders of municipal councils. That if the minister wants to issue an order, then the minister, in my view, ought to be taking responsibility for issuing the order. Whatever. I did have a second item, Mr. Chair. I just briefly, totally unrelated. As folks may know, I announced last week that I would not be seeking re-election. As part of that, the annual general meeting for Conservation Ontario came up after I made that decision. So in order not to create a problem for them come November, they could have it anyways because somebody may not be successful in the election. I did not seek a second term as the chair. So I am no longer the chair of Conservation Ontario. Somebody else has taken on that. So I say that because the board very graciously, and I was very appreciative of it, appointed me as our representative on Conservation Ontario. And I'm quite prepared to continue to do that. But the board may want to consider going back to its traditional way of doing things and having the chair as the primary, I forget what the phrase is, but the primary representative and the vice chair as the secondary. Anyways, as I said, we don't have to decide tonight. The next meeting isn't until June, so we can do it at the May meeting. And I'm quite prepared to continue if that's the chair's wish, but I just thought I'd mention that so we can go back to our traditional.
Thank you, Andy. And for the record, I'm quite happy having you as our representative on Conservation Ontario. So.
Okay, well, thanks. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Andy. Anything else in the open forum before we move on? No. I guess next we move into closed session. So can I have a thank you, Sherry,